Welcome to VERITAS. Don't forget to hit subscribe and the notification bell so you never miss our latest episodes. Please like this video, comment below with your thoughts, and share it with others seeking truth. For more exclusive content and to support our mission, visit VERITAS7.com.
The questions you always had. The answers you were never given. The place to seek the truth. Welcome to VERITAS.
Tonight on VERITAS, our special guest is Andy Thomas. For more than 30 years, Andy has been a voice for the unexplained. He has spoken to thousands, heard their secrets, and carried their stories into the light. His latest work, Strange, Paranormal Realities in the Everyday World, continues that journey with powerful accounts of encounters people rarely dare to share. Ghosts that step into quiet rooms, voices that reach across the veil, lights in the sky that move as if the laws of nature no longer apply, premonitions that arrive uninvited and prove themselves with chilling accuracy. Ordinary men and women, teachers, soldiers, doctors, parents, people from every walk of life who would never call themselves mystics, yet found themselves face to face with the extraordinary. Many kept silent for years until they found someone they could trust. Andy has listened. He has compared their accounts, and he has added his own encounters, moments that changed how he sees the world, and may change how you see it too. Tonight we step into that hidden space where the strange is not rare, but part of everyday life. Andy Thomas is coming up next. Welcome to VERITAS. If this is your first time listening, welcome home. To access tonight's full interview and all of our exclusive material, simply join the VERITAS Plus family by clicking on the subscribe button at VERITAS7.com. While you're there, don't forget to visit the VERITAS store, featuring a range of great products, including Focus Life Force Energy. Experience the benefits with a 15-day free trial of FLFE, no credit card required. Also, be sure to explore our enhanced VERITAS Plus transcripts, offering full transcripts, comprehensive analysis, and exclusive insights for every episode. As a VERITAS Plus member, you'll receive a 50% discount on these enhanced transcripts. Want to get in touch? Be a guest on the program? Suggest someone or share feedback? Just click the contact button at VERITAS7.com. So sit back, relax, and enjoy tonight's program. His website is truthagenda.org. His new book is called Strange, Paranormal Realities in the Everyday World. And today we're discussing when the unexplainable becomes everyday, encounters beyond the ordinary. And directly from south of London, I'd like to welcome Andy Thomas. Hello, Andy, and welcome to VERITAS. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Very nice to be here, thank you.
My pleasure. And I always thank you, people from the other side of the pond, for staying awake late at night. We had some technical difficulties, but we are starting again. And I have to ask you first, tell us your story. How did it all begin for you, Andy?
So, I've been researching the paranormal for well over 30 years now. And for me, it began with researching crop circles and UFOs. And that was what drew me into the world of the paranormal. And I realized very quickly, as I started to research those areas, that, number one, there were lots of facets to it. With crop circles, there are sightings of strange lights, strange things happen in and around them. But, of course, then you meet other people who are looking into the circles, then who also were investigating other paranormal realms, ghosts, conspiracy theories, psychic phenomena, and I got exposed to a lot of that very quickly. And I then got drawn in, and I realized that there was more than just crop circles going on. And yet I saw how the mainstream mistreated the crop circles. They did not report them accurately, and they still don't, I have to say. And that then awakened me to the reality that there's something going on here which is not acknowledged properly in the world. And that just fired me up, really, to want to find out more and actually share, experiences of the paranormal, share views without any fear, without any shame, because I think a lot of people do bury their paranormal experiences. And so I have now written the book Strange, which it records many people's different paranormal experiences. And what I'm trying to do is get the conversation going to say, this is happening to very everyday, real folk. It's time to now talk about this on a much bigger level.
And I'm so glad they're just discussing crop circles, because this is something that has been around for a very long time. I believe since the 1930s. I've had the pleasure of meeting Colin Andrews for decades now. And all of a sudden, it's almost like people don't talk about it, but I believe you have a website, or you have a strategic alliance with somebody who's building a website that's going to bring this to the forefront once again. And that's great news.
Yes, so I'm working with my old colleague Barry Reynolds, and Barry is very much a statistician. He's a man of data, and both of us have been concerned that a lot of people are still coming to crop circles today. Some of the UFO podcasts, for instance, have suddenly started talking about them and being more open-minded towards them, and yet a lot of people don't realize that there's these decades of work and research that's been done, much of which has never gone online before. So we are resurrecting that. We're contacting all these researchers with all this work buried deep in archives that have never seen the light of day. And we're sharing that. We're bringing this out with what we call the Crop Circle Research Archive. So there is a website now, and it is circleresearcharchive.com. And there's not much there at the moment, but there will be. But you'll see the beginnings of what we intend to do. And we want to get this knowledge shared, because I think there is still, even now, a misunderstanding about crop circles. The media still says it was all began by Doug and Dave in 1991. They're all man-made, or they're nearly all man-made. And there's a lot of stuff said without any evidence at all. Well, we have the evidence that says that cannot be the whole story. There is very clearly a real phenomenon running alongside however many are man-made. And we want to make that point. So that's a very exciting project. It's going to take a while to get all the stuff there, but it is something which, I'm very excited about, and hopefully people will begin to understand that this kind of intensive research has been going on for many years indeed.
And this is one of the biggest enigmas. And I've asked everybody who I've interviewed who discusses crop circles, I get the same answer when I ask them, what do you think they are, or what's the purpose? And nobody really knows. And this is what keeps me glued to any research about this. When you see these magnificent, I'm not talking about the Doug and Dave, that they seem kind of rudimentary, but when you see these beautiful, beautiful patterns, what exactly are they? Some of them look even like QR codes. How would you be able to do something like that? Or that alien that's in little bits, almost like if it's computer digits, if you know what I mean. How do you think they do this, and for what purpose?
So, that's the big question, and it's a question which, disappointingly, I've never been able to answer. So, I've always taken a position with crop circles that we don't really know what's going on. So yes, some are man-made, put them over there, don't worry about them. What about the ones that cannot be explained so easily? And there's a lot of those. You've got biological anomalies occurring in the plants, you've got eyewitnesses, people who are watching them occur within seconds, and you've got these incredible patterns. Some could be natural in origin, others clearly display levels of consciousness. And as you mentioned, some have just shown us pictures of aliens, there have been encoded messages. So, that's a level of consciousness clearly at work here. So what I would say, therefore, is you have to stand back and just make observations. We cannot rule out that it could be extraterrestrial, extra-dimensional maybe also, but underground water is also inextricably linked up with their distribution. I believe personally that natural forces are a part of this, but not the whole story. And you begin to realize it's very multi-layered. It is not straightforward. And I know we're always looking for very easy black and white answers, but I don't think there are any when it comes to crop circles. And yet, still they inspire people, still they move people to begin to look at the world around them with new eyes. And that's the thing. If crop circles make people think, if it makes people stand back and look at the universe in a new way, that is a major achievement, even if that wasn't what was intended by whatever is actually making them.
Let's begin with this question, Andy, because this is at the heart of it. When you say the paranormal, What does that really mean to you, and why do you think people misunderstand it so easily?
So the word paranormal is actually a mixture of Greek and Latin, and it literally means beyond the normal. So, what is normal? I suppose everyday normal life is normal. Things that happen to you, like a ghost or even seeing a strange creature or a UFO, that is paranormal. That's beyond the normal. You could use the phrase or the term supernatural. And sometimes the paranormal can be supernatural, but not always. But I'm interested in a blend of all of these things. And in the book that has just come out called Strange, that I've spent years really working on, what I'm trying to do is look at both sides of this. I have met so many people, thousands of people over the years of my research, who've had incredible encounters with all kinds of paranormal phenomena, and they're not taken seriously. And many of them fear to even tell anybody, but they'll share it with me because they see me giving a lecture about this. They'll open up to people like me and perhaps yourself. And that's when you realize that this kind of stuff's happening to everyone. Not just people interested in the paranormal. It's happening to everyday folk, and normally out of the blue. They don't know anything like that will ever happen to them. And of course, it changes them very substantially. So the book tells their stories. Some verbally have been told to me, others people have written them down for me. And you realize as you go through that there is a pattern. It's happening over and over again, and it's having a profound effect on people, and we need to talk about it. And what the book Strange is trying to do is get these conversations opened up again, because a lid's been put on them by the skeptics for too long, and the world of scientism that doesn't want to hear about this kind of thing because it feels apparently threatened by all this. But we need to move on from that, and we need to have proper discussions now about the paranormal.
I think in the distant past, spirituality and science worked together, but now what cannot be explained is ascribed to spirituality, and science is becoming almost like a dogma, almost like a religion. It cannot be questioned when it's supposed to be questioned, especially when it comes to paranormal and, as you said, the supernatural. So I have this question. What's the difference between the paranormal and the supernatural in your view? Are we mislabeling the phenomena by calling them supernatural when they may simply be parts of nature we don't yet understand?
So, I think supernatural and paranormal, as we just discussed, I think can be interchangeable, but not always. Supernatural, I think, tends to refer more to realms that are not this world. They are other dimensional. And yet, what's wrong with that? Scientists are forever telling us now there are multiple dimensions. So, to me, the supernatural and the paranormal, it's just science that hasn't yet been defined. In the end, clearly, everything will have a scientific explanation to it. It must do. But what we're finding at the moment is that many of the scientists that you would like to look at this kind of thing, they won't. They've got very close-minded. They have decided that the paranormal and the supernatural can't exist. So they say, well, we're not even going to look at any claim of that. But of course, that's not the scientific method. The irony is that they are more unscientific by being like that than the people that they accuse of being mad because they believe in the paranormal. And I think that's where it's unfair. So there will be an explanation for everything eventually, but it doesn't mean it's a mundane explanation. And in the book Strange, I actually employed the talents of three scientifically minded people, but people who were also open-minded to finding new explanations for the paranormal, to make the point that science is not the enemy of the paranormal. It can be its friend as well. But I begin the book by explaining, quite a few occasions where I've been attacked by skeptics at lectures, and they get up and they rant and they rave and they tell me I'm mad and so on, because I think they feel so threatened by people taking it seriously because it seems to threaten something about all these pillars of wisdom that they have put in place that perhaps are questionable. Well, in my view, they're definitely questionable. And they don't want that threatened, so they will shout down anybody that tries to look at it again. But we have to move beyond that now, and we have to put them aside and find a new way forward to how we can track down what exactly the paranormal is and indeed why it matters.
And I think my respect to some people, for example, Dr. Claude Swanson, who passed away a few years ago, friend of this program, he wrote the book, The Science of the Paranormal. And he is a PhD. Want the full story? This is just part one. Now offering video interviews and discounted transcripts for members. Become a Veritas Plus member today at veritas7.com. From MIT in the United States. This is somebody respected in the community who still went and conducted experiments and replicated them. So you would think that somebody as respected as he was would send out a trend for other people to follow.
You would think that, but sadly, I mean, especially in a world of peer review, anybody that steps outside of the orthodoxy normally gets condemned. And somebody who, was perfectly seen as a very respectable scientist, the moment they start to slightly take seriously areas that the orthodoxy does not accept, they are rebranded a maverick. And I think that's what happened with him as well. And they are then pushed aside. They are then not considered scientific anymore by the scientific community. And I mean, there's lots of examples of that. And another one would be Richard Tarnas, who was seen as a very respectable psychologist, if you like. He was he documented the history of human wisdom and everybody loved him. When he then wrote a book about astrology, saying that he thought it was real, well, that was the end of his career in the more academic world. And he was condemned for doing that. We've seen that also with Ibn Alexander, who was a neuroscientist, who then started to talk about near-death experiences, which I cover in the book, and out-of-body experiences, because that is not taken seriously by the scientific world. And again, he found himself being pushed to the fringes. But that's the silliness of what is going on, is that if people cannot stretch the boundaries of science, it will always get stuck in this one little box. And I think that's what's happened. And I think that's now why more and more of us do need to speak out. And people who are scientifically minded do need to stop the fear of their careers being damaged and actually say, all right, enough's enough. We now need to look at this. And I'd like to believe that will happen, but we do still have quite a long way to go, I fear.
You used two words, peer review. And for years I've been saying this, and you can agree or disagree with me. But they say this is the gold standard of scientific credibility, but it stifles innovation. It puts conformity over creativity, bias and subjectivity, and it just allows this slow progress and bottlenecks anybody that comes out with a new idea. Would you agree with this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what happens all the time. But again, it speaks to me of fear. I think that the scientific world, especially since the so-called Enlightenment, whatever we want to call that, it's got into a mode of thinking it is always right. And anybody on the outside of their clique, their club, must be wrong if they challenge them. And I think that's where it's gone wrong. And it's just become a self-defending, self-existing sort of pillar that nobody else from the outside can get into. But I don't think that is a sensible way forward at all. And so they lash out, they condemn anybody that challenges it. And I mean, I say early on in the Strange book, if you're a skeptic, you're not going to like this book. And I don't waste too much time on them. I don't say they're always wrong, because sometimes, yes, there can be more mundane explanations for things, but equally they're not always right either. And especially when you have multiple witnesses to the paranormal, and that happens a lot, whether it be with ghosts or UFOs or whatever, where whole groups of people are witnessing these things. You cannot just keep saying that strange sightings are a trick of the brain, because if that's the case, how is everybody having the same hallucination? So to me, it is clear that there is no logic any longer to this continual denial of the paranormal. And I do believe that one day, perhaps with AI as a tool to help us, there could be a shift.
Well, I think for anybody who feels that they're skeptical, and there's nothing wrong with a level of skepticism. I use that all the time. But, for example, years ago, I was invited to this ranch in the northwest of the United States because people told me, you're going to see all sorts of UFOs. Of course, I don't believe it. I either know or I don't. But I decided to fly out there, for years. And then one day, I sat down at night. I imagined in my mind the lights that people are talking about. All of a sudden, one showed up. And they said, think about it, and it's going to glow on you. Purple light all of a sudden stops above me, and it glowed. It's just like a power-up. I had my camera with me. I could not take the camera and film it because I was so mesmerized. Thank God somebody who was there said, don't worry, I got you covered. I filmed the moment that you saw that. So people who are skeptical, get yourself out there, experience for yourself, and then you'll know how it feels. But,
yes.
Again, one last thing about the peer review process. To me, Andy, this is a tool by the establishment to stifle innovation. It's suppressing the paradigm shifts, and it controls the narrative. But you've been at this for decades. Why do you think we live in a world where 2/3 of people report an unexplained experience, yet almost nobody talks about it openly?
So I think, it comes down to fear. So, it's funny because when I meet people at lectures who share their stories with me, very often they will open up a conversation with, well, I've never told anybody this before, and then they start to open up and share a story that they've felt desperate to share for years, but they've always felt, and sometimes correctly, that their friends or family would mock them, would make fun of them if they shared it. And sometimes they'll share these stories when they are standing next to their friends, and their friends are looking at them going, you've never told me this. And they'll say, well, I didn't think you would take me seriously. And that's the thing. When fear of ridicule is so entrenched in our society, people do stay quiet. They have been attacked over the years. They've seen what's happened to the careers of those who have tried to talk about this kind of thing. I think where that shifted a bit, though, is certainly since social media came along. So, yes, there are some ills of social media, but it has also enabled people to now begin to share things that, mainstream platforms were not giving any space to. And people don't feel so alone. They begin to realize that, it isn't just them. And you can then find support groups if you've had a strange experience, and you can exchange notes, and you can begin to realize that there is another world to the one we're shown in the mainstream. And of course, what's happening now is that mainstream television stations, things like that, newspapers, they're losing their power. More and more people are just sharing things online that they want to share, which is why I think there's such a concerted effort to try to shut that down, because again, that is a threat to the establishment. But I think a day is coming when what we call mainstream won't be mainstream anymore. The current mainstream could become the fringe. And I'd like to believe that the more people share their experiences of the paranormal or their unusual views as they would be seen today, the more that will actually become the norm. And I think that will need to happen before science really stops and thinks, okay, maybe now we should be looking at this. But I think that day may yet come.
And you're right. Social media can also be seen positive and negative. In the old days, if somebody experienced something paranormal, you probably know the name Dr. Leo Sprinkle, professor of a university, who actually in his after hours would actually have people come in and tell the stories. Those were the times without social media. Those people felt alone. Those people felt like they were crazy, but thank goodness we had people like Dr. Leo. Right now with social media, and, not to call them echo chambers, but you have all these groups where people talk about their experiences. What do you think that has done to this topic? Do you think people feel more open to discuss their experiences more than before?
Increasingly so, I think. And of course, on social media, you can share in a way that doesn't necessarily expose who you are. But I think more and more people are now becoming brave. And I think they're feeling that there is a kind of a battle for truth going on. It isn't just in the paranormal realms. We've seen this also with people that question establishment versions of events, all around. They're beginning to think, well, why can't I have this view? And that can, of course, then bring dangers too, and you can get into the echo chambers and you stop listening to all sides. But certainly when it comes to the paranormal, I think it's been a very promising sign that more and more people are doing this. But I think the turning point will come when, and it might take technology to do this, when some sort of third party comes in and looks at something like the paranormal, like perhaps AI, which I'm afraid, there are very bad sides to AI, but there's also some good sides. If you were to program AI truly fairly, without any boundaries of skepticism that currently, sadly, do drive it a bit too often at the moment, I think it would begin to look at the paranormal. It would begin to say to itself, why is this not being looked at? Why has that not been considered before? When that puts it all together, I think it may well start to analyze all that data, years, centuries of data, and say, there is something here that should be looked at. And so, in the book, Strange, when we get towards the end of the book, I discuss that. What is the future of paranormal research? And AI, it might be an enemy, but it could also be a friend to, calculation powers that we've not really had before to process data and see patterns that almost certainly, I think, will prove that the paranormal does exist, and that will then sideline the current skeptic or scientists that will not look at it. And I'm not branding all science, by the way, as bad. Science is wonderful. We're currently talking through a medium of amazing science. So don't get me wrong. However, scientism, that has been a problem, and I think that does now need to shift, because it has become, I think, an unhealthy religion, which is ironic given that it seems to think that it had replaced religion long ago, but it carries the same problems with the dogma, and that does need challenging.
Indeed. And speaking of people that, when people feel comfortable to share their stories, you are an example, Andy. And then, after your talks, reading your book, it tells me that people don't just ask questions. They lean in and whisper almost as if they've entered a confessional with you. They tell you stories they've carried for years, sometimes decades. Why do you think they trust you with these secrets when they stay silent with everyone else in the past?
I mean, secrets are a burden, aren't they? I mean, most people have some secrets somewhere, but deep down, in a way, you want to tell the world, you want to get it off your shoulders and get it out there. And especially when it comes to strange experiences, who are you going to tell? There are some friends that might take you seriously, but if you've never met anyone that's researched the paranormal before, who are you going to speak to? I'm lucky. I'm very lucky, because over the years I've been invited to speak for many different community groups, just really normal, everyday people who don't have any bias towards the paranormal, or indeed any experience of it in any official capacity. And so they see me standing up there, and I'm talking about ghosts and psychic phenomena and crop circles and out-of-body experiences. And they clearly think, hang on a minute, if this man is willing to stand up and risk the criticism is probably going to get, maybe I can, and he will take me seriously. And they're right, because I will. And, I can't ever say for sure what the answer to anything is, or, whether I can be absolutely sure somebody's telling me the whole truth or just a truth that felt real to them. But mostly you see in their eyes the absolute passion, the need to share something that clearly did have a level of reality to them. And I won't judge that. I will hear them. And if I think there is something there that chimes, say, with another story I've heard, I will put them in touch with other people. I will say to them, do you know you're not alone in this? And for the book, people shared their stories with me. They said, yes, I want you to share this in the book. And, then in the book, a narrative unfolds where you begin to realize that all these seemingly disparate subjects, actually, they all merge in the middle. And where it merges is you realize that there are other realms, there are other dimensions, and clearly there are things coming and going between those dimensions. The universe isn't a straightforward A to B place. It's leaky, it runs in a very strange fashion. And I think acknowledging that begins to make you realize that, in a way, the paranormal is not an aberration of the universe, it's kind of an inevitability of it if we start to consider that it might be a much more leaky place than we ever thought before.
Speaking of people sharing their stories, do you think the act of sharing these encounters is sometimes more important than proving them? Almost like the testimony itself carries the power.
I think it does. And I mean, you can, and unless you've got like multiple film of something, especially in an age now of AI fakery, you can't really ever prove anything. But I think we feel as human beings the truth of something. You see it in their eyes. You can feel in your gut when somebody is telling you something that's genuinely happened to them, or at least genuinely meant something to them and moved them. And I think that's not a bad game.
17 seasons of uncensored interviews. While you're hearing part 1 with ads, Veritas Plus members get part 2 immediately, plus video interviews and discounted transcripts. Become a Veritas Plus member today at veritas7.com.
Because you also know when somebody's spinning you a story. It's pretty clear when somebody's not being quite straight with you, if you feel your way into that. And I think that we can be very sure that the majority of people that do, describe their paranormal experiences are just trying to say something that happened. And like you say, proving it, I don't think anybody can do that. Just the sharing of it, it's like it's a release. And I've seen that in so many people that I've spoken to. It's almost like, they're grateful, they're thankful that they found somebody that they can share it with. And that's an experience I'm sure many other paranormal researchers have had. And that's a beautiful experience, because what I'm trying to do with Strange is get these experiences shared, make people feel they're not so alone, that this actually is happening to somebody somewhere all the time. And maybe, and here's an irony, the strange isn't quite so strange as perhaps we think.
I think more than sharing the story, it's most important to them to be heard without being judged. I think that's most importantly. But you've heard thousands of accounts. What patterns stand out across the stories? What are the most common kinds of encounters that you've seen?
So in the book Strange, I kind of open up quite early on with, right, what's the top 10 most reported paranormal phenomena that I personally have heard? And you would have to say number 1 on that list, or I would have to say, is ghosts, beyond any question. I have met so many people with really incredible ghost stories, many of them positive. They're beautiful. They've had conversations with relatives or loved ones, some of whom they didn't know had even died, and it turns out they saw an apparition of them at the very moment that person died. So they just took it as a normal conversation, and then learned later on that at that very moment that person was dying in some accident or somewhere. That's something I've heard over and over again. Then you get the more spooky kinds, apparitions walking between walls, or, clearly being unhappy. And sadly, it is a truth that, people that die in this world in traumatic circumstances do seem more common to leave a ghost. There's something about that, being shocked out of this realm in a very painful and unexpected way, seems to sort of trap some essence of them here for a while. I would like to hope not forever, and that eventually it moves on. And you do find that, interestingly, most ghosts tend to be either of people that have passed recently or the last 2 or 3 centuries. You do get earlier ghosts, like Roman ghosts, for instance, but they do seem to be less common. And I think that whatever powers up a ghost, there's something that finally dissipates and shifts. So ghosts, absolutely number 1 on the list. Then I would say, you can have related things like poltergeists. I've heard many incredible encounters with poltergeists. And then you come to UFOs, or UAP as we're meant to call them these days. And I have met many professional, qualified people, soldiers, sailors, police, pilots, of course, very often, who have described seeing things to me that are just quite astonishing. And of course, now there's more of an openness about that because Congress is talking about them. I know there's hope for more disclosure wherever that goes. But it's making people again feel that actually maybe now they can open up about things that they definitely would have been ridiculed for some years ago. So you have all that. You have the psychic realms, out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, and a whole section that I call bizarre happenings that are just, you can't really categorize them, but they're really, really odd indeed, including, just to give one example, a lady who was driving to a restaurant one night and suddenly she claims her car was lifted up into the sky and she was flying for several miles and then got deposited on another road in the middle of nowhere somewhere else. Now, I looked her in the eye and I thought, you're telling the truth, aren't you? She said she's never had a stroke or any kind of psychotic episode. And you just think, yeah, things like this actually do happen. Now, how it happened, why it happened, well, we can only speculate. But, there's a lot of things like that in the book also, which are not necessarily common experiences, but they meet in the middle of being bizarre experiences that many people are having. But again, it's so bizarre, sometimes they dare not talk about it. But yeah, there are clearly repeating forms of the paranormal, and I hear about them over and over again. And what I try to do in the book is analyze them, see what's going on, what could this mean, and you begin to realize that they all join up. They're not just independent things, whether they be a ghost or an angel or an alien or whatever it is. There's something about them that has a commonality. And I think they're all entities that exist between different realms and sometimes cross into this realm and other times probably exist in other realms. And you begin to then again realize, oh, right, when you look at the universe like that, as a universe of doorways, of portals with things coming and going, it's kind of inevitable people will see these kinds of things.
By the way, I have to give credit in a way to your MOD, your Ministry of Defense in the UK, because in 2008, it declassified the UFO files all the way through 2013. But in 2008, that was the catalyst that started this program. I started solely discussing UFOs. Now I discussed health and everything else, but that was the catalyst. But things are changing now. Who do you think is at the forefront of disclosure if you had to compare the UK and the United States?
I mean, there's a lot of hopes, of course, that the congressional hearings about UAP and the amount of whistleblowers who've come forward and people like, David Grush. And Jake Barber and all these pilots that are saying, look, this stuff's real. We've got to talk about it because if nothing else, it's a security issue. I think that has made a big difference. Lou Elizondo, another, of course, prominent one. And I'm well aware there's not everybody feels comfortable. Some worry that in itself is a weird kind of double bluff. It's throwing us off the scent. But the way I feel about it is that if you go down the road of there's no smoke without fire, I think there is. It is building to something. And although I'm not so sure that the full disclosure that some people would love to happen, it is going to happen any time now, nonetheless, I think we're on the road to it. And I do think that sooner or later, somebody somewhere is going to open up with something that is so undeniable that there's going to have to be some new level of openness towards it. And it does look at the moment like it is likely to come from America. So, yes, we have declassified things. But I have to say, I think on the whole, the British are more skeptical, and certainly the British media is very skeptical, whereas I have seen a bit more openness in the American media towards talking about this. So I think there is a hope there, and various of your politicians are now speaking out saying we need to investigate this. So, I think doorways are opening, but there are factions, clearly factions that don't want it to come out. I think there's a battle for truth going on under the surface that I imagine is quite dark and quite savage, which is why, some people are now having their reputations attacked and people are trying to say they're mad or don't listen to them. You get the feeling that people that don't want it to come out and the people that do want it to come out. That's all coming to a head, and it's reaching a bit of a fever pitch. So I don't think we're going to get much disclosure from Russia or China. They must have their own secrets in the UAP world, absolutely. But I don't see any sign of that happening yet. America, which has a more of a history of course, belief in freedom, I think that's more likely where it's going to come. The impetus is going to come from there, unless it suddenly comes from somewhere utterly unexpected or from the arrival of ETs themselves, maybe. But that we will see.
I think the ridicule factor has gone down for sure. I remember 10, 15 years ago, anybody that went into any media, they would be interviewed seriously, and then it would be 99% edited to make you look like a fool, like you're mad. That's no longer the case, which tells me if they are indeed preparing for disclosure. I'm always skeptical when the news comes out from a world leader. I always believe that it's going to come out at a grassroots level. But as you said, the United States I think it holds the hammer. I've talked to leaders from other countries who have told me we are ready. We have information, but we've been threatened by the United States to not do it. Mexico is one of them. I spoke to a brigadier general many years ago who canceled an interview with me 5 minutes before, and he said, I can't talk about this. But, it's about the fires in the Bay of Campeche. You remember this years ago? And he told me, all I can tell you is it is unexplained. That's as far as I can go. So the United States holds the hammer. But when someone says to you, Andy, that they saw a ghost or a UFO or felt a presence, how do you sort out what feels credible versus what might be imagination?
So I think, again, you have to sort of hear the context of it, see the way that the story has been related. I mean, if it's being related in a boastful way, where you kind of feel somebody wants you to believe something because it's going to be good for their ego, I'm a little bit more suspicious. But I have to say, I find that doesn't happen very often. And anybody that does speak to me like that, I wouldn't even include their testimony. And in the book, I do explain how I chose the different testimony that I do share in the book, and I was very careful about it. And in the end, you just know when somebody's being truthful. You can hear it in the tone of their voice. You can see it in just the way their face looks. And you think, well, if you are trying to make this up, 9 times out of 10, what they are doing is actually making their lives hard, because some people that come forward with this stuff, as we've already acknowledged, get a hard time. It's not easy to be a whistleblower for the paranormal. You are inviting trouble. So I don't see why many people would want to do that. Mostly you can hear there's as we've already acknowledged, an absolute need to share it. It's just that they've sat on this often for so long and struggled to find anybody willing to take them seriously, and you realize immediately they just need to get that out there into the world, even if they only tell one person. And often, and some of the testimony in the book is anonymous. They don't know or didn't know when they were telling me that I was ever going to share this with anyone. They were just sharing it with me because they wanted to hear what I had to say. So I'm personally very comfortable that the majority of people that share these stories are genuine. Yes, there are fraudsters. Yes, we know that people will make stuff up sometimes, but in my experience, it's generally pretty clear when they are. And in the end, the truth will out, as they say.
Do you develop a keen sense after doing this for a while, and you can detect the facial expressions, the vibe, when somebody's lying? I'm sure you've developed that too.
Yeah, I mean, you have to. And I mean, I'm not saying that in any boastful way, but I think you just do. So, I mean, this is my 34th year of researching this kind of stuff. And that's a lot of people you meet. And you also then find all the cross-referencing stories. You will think, well, that reminds me of that one, or that's a bit like that story. But very often the person telling you the story didn't know that anybody else had ever had it. They'd never thought whether anybody else might have had the same experience. And that is often a revelation to them when I say, well, are you aware that is really quite similar to this story over here or this one there? And that, again, it's a comfort to them to realize that they haven't been alone. So yeah, I think you have a radar in the end. You have an antenna, and yes, I'm sure there may sometimes be elements of a story that they've forgotten or they might have mixed up somewhere down the line. But again, you can normally tell that if a vagueness comes in on a certain point, I'll always quiz them on that, and I'll try to pin that down. And if something's not clear, again, I won't include it. I won't pass that on to anybody because I do want to be very sure that what is getting passed on, it is of the best veracity that you could possibly can. But on the whole, yeah, I think people that do talk about this stuff, they have everything to lose by being silly and making it up. And I don't think that's what motivates it at all. I think there's just some inner truth they know they really need to share.
Let's talk about ghosts and spirits. They appear again and again in your research. What do these encounters teach us about the possibility of an afterlife?
It's an amazing thing, isn't it? Because for years, I mean, I was brought up in the Christian tradition. That was my background. And then I'm kind of a universalist. I'm not an atheist. I think there are layers of consciousness that permeate the universe. Call them what you will. And so therefore, that sort of led me to be open-minded about the causes of what all this is. And, ghosts especially, you have to begin to think, well, what does this mean?
Loving this interview? We have 17 seasons of content just like this, plus part 2 of every episode, all ad-free for Veritas Plus members. Become a member today at veritas7.com.
They're there for something beyond this. And I've been led to the realization that there has to be. I don't think it's necessarily as straightforward as the heaven and hell that mainstream religions tend to go for, but I do think that there is some essence of us that does exist beyond this world. It's the only conclusion really that I can come to. Whether it's us in the way we are now, I don't know. Whether it's just some kind of semblance of our memories or our personality becomes some other energetic form and just retains elements of it, I don't know. But it does seem to me that information and memories are retained, and whatever represents those can come back, and it can interact with people here, and it can converse, and information can be exchanged. So you therefore have to say, okay, let's call it the afterlife if we must, but there are other dimensions where I think we progress into on some level. It might not be quite like this, flesh and blood, I don't know, maybe it is, but on some other layer of existence. But yeah, I have pretty much come to the conclusion that there must be something beyond this, which is of course very encouraging. And that's another reason why I think some people are actually almost relieved when they do accept the reality of the paranormal, because I think that it does lead you to the view of, wow, okay, it isn't just this. The scientists tell us this is your one life, and when it ends, that's over. And that creates great pressure and I think sometimes depression. But when you then realize, okay, well, maybe this is but a doorway to other existences, yeah, I think that changes your whole outlook on life. And I don't think we can ever truly be sure what's over the other side, but I think we can begin to come to a realization that there is something other than just this. And, I find that really exciting.
I remember growing up as a child and laughing at my parents when somebody brought a Ouija board to our house. And being in the Catholic Church, they would say, nope, we don't want this in this household. You're inviting them, and there are good and bad entities out there. And if you actually are calling them, you're giving them permission to enter. And I used to laugh at them thinking, come on, that's ridiculous. But as I gotten older, I've received a lot of email from people saying, nope, that was actually true. When you play these games and you say, please come to me, you're giving them permission to enter. Do you believe that?
Yeah, I mean, certainly. I mean, I've worked over the years with psychics and I've seen channeling and all of this. I think that you can access other realms, but it doesn't automatically mean that what is coming through is positive. And in the book, I actually tell the story and I had two of the gentlemen who were present. They both described the same story to me, where some years ago they were having a meal with, wives and partners, and they all thought, let's do the Ouija board. And just as a laugh, and they
Yeah.
got the glass, and they all put their hands on it, and the glass was spelling out, names and answering questions. And as it went on, it got more and more like uncomfortable because it was coming up with things that nobody should have known. It was like it was drawing from them information that actually nobody around the circle would ever have shared. And in the end, it was almost like going so fast. Finally, the glass flew off and smashed against the wall. And they were so terrified. They all said, we are never, ever doing that again. So in a way, it's interesting. I think there is therefore something that is real. It has a level of reality and it works. But yeah, you don't know what you're inviting in. And if you are going to do anything like that or try an out-of-body experience, astral traveling, anything like that, remember this. There's a spectrum out there. And not everything is good. I believe there are beautiful, very good entities, and there's less good entities. And some people who have done astral traveling have described realms where there's very dark creatures and entities you really don't want to hang around with. And if they get a portal, it seems to me, if they get somebody calling them to this realm, they go, great, here's a road in, they can abuse that, and it can be harmful. So I don't necessarily think that it's all demonic, and I address that in the book. I think there are spectrums. You can call the good spectrum the angels, the lower spectrum the demons maybe, but it's not all demonic. It's just an existence that you can access in different levels of it. But you do need to be very responsible and very aware of what it is you're calling in. And anybody that dabbles in the paranormal deliberately should be aware of some of the where people have, found themselves on the wrong end of that. So it's something you don't do lightly, and you have to take responsibility with it, especially if you're working with other people and you're claiming that you are accessing the paranormal for them. You need to be really, really careful and make sure you're protected in many spiritual ways.
One of the aspects of doing what I do in researching this, Andy, is proving myself wrong. For example, I used to think people playing Ouija board, they're just moving that thing with their own hands. This is not true. So in 2011, I think it was, I was at the ECETI Ranch, James Gilliland. And before I departed to come home, he said, I want to do a reading for you. And I'm like, okay, I'm open-minded skeptic. But anyway, he told me the name of my alleged spirit guide. Like, okay, I took that name with me, fine. So a couple of months later, I go to Sedona to a conference, and I was invited to somebody's house at night, and they had a similar game, not Ouija, but similar, where you put your hands and you go around. So we were playing. All of a sudden, the thing started moving, saying, oops, this person, Nadhia is the name, Nadhia is here. I could not believe what I heard. I only know that name. That's the spirit guide name. I said, okay, guys, I need to remove my hands because that just came. But I want to ask a question. Ask Nadhia where I met her. Without my hands, they started moving, and it said, you met her at the ECETI Stargate. Now, how do you explain that? I mean, the hairs behind my back are just going up.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's the kind of story where you cannot explain. Nobody knew this but me.
No, and I think what that says is this kind of stuff works or can work. And just to dismiss it out of hand is, I think, a mistake, put it that way. And that's a mistake that, the skeptic scientists make. It clearly can work. I mean, I have met psychics who were able to tell me, for instance, the first names of both my grandparents. There is no way they could have known. They didn't know me. I'd never met them before. It's like, and I've been present at channelings where information has come through that has turned out to be very accurate. And you think, well, there's just simply no way that could have been done, even with trickery. And we know that trickery can occur, but I don't think that's how it's happening for the most part. So I mean, I think we should always be aware that, again, if you connect in with these realms, you might get more results than you bargain for, and you should take them seriously. And then, of course, be aware that it might open doorways to things to share things that you're not comfortable to share. And that's when, and it sounds like you did, that's when you have to choose whether you go ahead with that or you withdraw from that.
Exactly. Now, have you found that ghost encounters are more often frightening, or do people come away comforted, feeling that someone is still with them?
There are some darker stories, and in the book, I try to give both ends of the spectrum. But I have to say, the majority of ghosts that I've heard described are either it's a beautiful experience where the people have seen their relatives or whatever, or quite a neutral experience where they've seen a figure, and it's some people seem quite matter of fact about it. They don't even feel frightened. It's just like a bit surprised, and the figure hasn't done anything negative. Sometimes they smiled even, and there seems to be almost like a friendly presence, and then it's moved on. And occasionally there's even quite sort of funny things. So no, I wouldn't say that they were all dark and spooky. And one thing I've really tried to get away from in this book, even on the front cover, which is radiant, it has a lovely color. We wanted to show that the paranormal and the supernatural, it isn't always spooky, because it would be so easy just to put a picture of spooky trees and weird light coming through, and that has its place, but that's not, I would say, what I hear about most. And many people, they come out of their paranormal experiences, I think, feeling more affirmed about life, realizing that there is more, especially if they've met a relative or whatever, comforted, or they've suddenly got a glimpse again into the fact that there are other realms, and it's almost like a relief. It's like, fantastic, it isn't just this, is it? There's clearly other things going on. So yes, there are some stories that are more negative, and if you read the book, you'll come across some of those. But I would say, in my personal experience, that they are in the minority, which is quite interesting.
When it comes to after-death communication, you've looked at it for a long time, where people feel they've heard or received messages from loved ones. Do you think this is memory, grief, or something far more real?
So, I mean, certainly. I mean, the world of medical research would tell you you've lost somebody close. Of course, you want to see them again. So your mind created a vision for you that made you think you'd seen them. Now, I can accept that sometimes might happen, but the circumstances in which many of these are actually really happening, it doesn't allow for that. And especially when, I've chatted with people who more than one person has been present when they saw the ghost of the relative, and, and they both experienced things. And there comes a point where you say, these people are they're being truthful about something they saw. They couldn't have both had the same hallucination. I just don't believe that, down to the nth degree. And I just one story worth relating, which I found fascinating, which is not so much a ghost, but more of an out-of-body experience, but it's related. I met a neurosurgeon, and he said he was always totally skeptical about out-of-body experiences. And one day, one of his patients who he had operated on said, when he saw him after the op, he said, while I was having the operation, I had this incredible vision of lifting out of my body, and I flew up above the hospital, and I went into the clouds, and there was this like paradise garden there. And, the patient described the garden, and he said, and there was a desk there, and there was a lady, a black lady, very officiously dressed, sitting at the desk. And he said he walked towards the desk, and she looked at these notes and rather severely went, "No, not yet," as if she was rejecting him from this paradise. And he suddenly came to and was back in his body. Okay. So the neurosurgeon said, so I heard that, and I just thought, well, the guy's had a mad hallucination. He said, or I did think that until 7 years later, another patient, completely different, who didn't know anything about that original story, described exactly the same experience, went to exactly the same place with the paradise garden and the lady at the desk, and the same experience of getting rejected because it clearly wasn't his time to be in whatever that realm was. And he said, that's completely changed my mind, because I cannot see how anybody could have just had exactly the same experience. And he said, I've come to realize there probably is a realm where that stuff exists. So, again, you do get backup sometimes, which is fantastic, because it's so often dismissed as tricks of the brain. And I get it, sometimes that can be an explanation, but very often not. And again, I find that rather comforting when I hear things like that, and where somebody is willing to change their mind in the face of some level of evidence.
And this is one of those topics that interests me, because some people say memories and consciousness are inside of your brain. I think they're everywhere, inside of every cell of your body, outside in your field. The NDE stories, people come back transformed with a different outlook on life. Do you think that's proof that consciousness exists outside the brain?
I think beyond any question now, when you look at all these phenomena, and especially out-of-body experiences, again, where clearly people can project their consciousness. This is not the whole story. I mean, I'm not denigrating our physical form. We're here. It has great importance. But equally, what we call ourselves, our soul, our spirit, whatever it might be, that plainly can exist independently. And I think, therefore, without any question, we are not just this. And when I hear reductionists saying, oh, yes, it's just a byproduct of the brain, it actually makes me quite angry to be so close-minded. So, for me, we should have long ago moved on from even having to think that the brain is the all. When you look at the work of people like Rupert Sheldrake, he's put forward brilliant models which could explain that basically consciousness is more like a radio frequency as a wavelength. It exists beyond this. This is just the receiver. Consciousness exists somewhere else, and it can come through the radio, if you like, but that's not the whole story. It's drifting out there somewhere on some other level of existence, and I think that is a much better model, I must say.
The question is, are we avatars?
Oh, yeah. Well, that comes down again to something that a lot of people are, now thinking about. That is this reality, a kind of projection? Is this in itself a simulation? And that, we have just projected into it, as you say, as an avatar of the real self, which is up there somewhere or in some other realm. Maybe we exist in lots of other realms. If this is a projection, if this is a simulation, who is it for? Why are we here? Is this just some way where we come to learn, as some people believe, and some kind of reincarnation zone? Or, is something being more manipulative with us? But yeah, in the end, it may well be that our consciousness can exist in many different forms and project into many different bodies and beings, which may not always be human. And again, when scientists keep talking about multidimensional realities, they never seem to make the jump that, well, maybe we all exist on those at the same time. And yet, when you look at what quantum research is uncovering and what physicists are now saying about how particles can come and go and move in time and exist at the same time in more than one space, you think, well, why can't we on a more macro level do that? And again, it's pretty clear to me that the universe is a very complex place, and it just doesn't work in this very predictive way that we've been told for so long. And, I'm really hoping for some level of admission around that, hopefully sooner rather than later, because it would make much more sense of the world around us than what we're being fed at the moment.
You probably have heard of stories of people who have died temporarily, and they hear what the nurses and the doctors are saying, and they come back and they say, I heard your joke. Like, wait a second, you were dead for 10 minutes or what have you. So when someone describes floating above an operating table, for example, and later recalls details they couldn't possibly have seen, What does that say about our current scientific understanding of mind and body?
Well, I think it says it's very narrow. And I'm not criticizing a neuroscientist or whatever. I'm sure they've learned many amazing things. We know there are certain parts of the brain that, yes, you can stimulate various kinds of experiences in when you do things to them, but it just isn't the whole story. And I mean, if you just take one example that Rupert Sheldrake points out as a flaw in that thinking. So he talks about memory, and the official model says that when you need to retrieve a memory, one part of your brain says to the other part of the brain, right, I need that memory now. But as Sheldrake points out, how does that make any sense? Because if that part of the brain knows what memory it's looking for to go there to find it, well, it already knows what the memory is. So it can't just exist like that. It must all be out there existing on some sort of level of reality where it's kind of eternal. It's always there. And we tune into different bits of it at different times. I think our understanding of mind and consciousness and spirit, I hope it will be transformed by the new physics that is gradually being accepted. Because I think what's happened is, especially since quantum research began, and that's well over a century ago now, it's almost like they've realized there's a big danger that it might actually back up what the mystics have been saying for years, and they've been trying to hide it. I've been trying to sideline it again. But I think they're going to have to face the reality that science and mysticism is going to meet in the middle like the horseshoe. Surely, already it's becoming clear that it does. But getting anybody in that world to admit it is really hard. And again, I think they fear ridicule. They fear being drummed out of that sort of peer group. But, I think we need to lose that and move forward from that. And we'll do a lot better if we can.
Before we take a break, let me just say this, because this is a great topic, and we'll move on to synchronicities, UFOs, premonitions, and so on when we come back. But for anybody who wants to really study this, take a look at the movie Astral City. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, Astral City. It's a Brazilian movie that talks about the afterlife, but from the side of the person who died. Apparently, this is based on a real-life story of a medium that actually grabbed all this information from the person who passed away, who was a doctor. And when he saw himself, he realized when he passed away how he was selfish, how his family was always left alone while he wanted to make more money, and so on. It's a beautiful movie. Anybody that hasn't watched it, I highly recommend. But how can people buy your book, Strange, and your other books as well, Andy?
So, you'll find it anywhere that sells books, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, all the usual places. You will find Strange out there very easily. If you'd like a kind of a quick, immediate information page on it, go to my website, which is truthagenda.org, and there's a whole page about it, and there's links to where you can buy it, and it tells you what's in the book, and it gives you some indications of the kind of material in it, and why it's very important that we do all talk about this stuff now. So, go to my website. It's a first port of call, truthagenda.org, and you'll find everything you need there.
Thank you. One more hour to come. I'm here with Andy Thomas, and you're listening to VERITAS. Don't go anywhere. Here's a track from Truth Frequency. You won't hear anywhere else. If you like what you hear, you can get the full track at veritas7.com on the page for today's guest. Thank you for listening to the first part of this important Veritas episode. To hear the rest and access all of our exclusive content, head over to the Veritas Plus member section or click the subscribe button at veritas7.com. While you're there, don't forget to visit the Veritas store, featuring a range of great products, including Focus Life Force Energy. Experience the benefits with a 15-day free trial of FLFE, no credit card required. Want to get in touch? Be a guest on the program? Suggest someone or share feedback? Just click the contact button at veritas7.com. Thank you for listening to Veritas, because you don't want to believe, you want to know.